practice.
Yeah, just trying to get used to just sitting here and talking slower and articulating my words a lot better, especially in front of the camera. I feel like when we first started at the desk, that was what, a month ago only.
Mm-hmm.
Like rewatching it and trying to edit through it and just hearing myself like nim, 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 nim. Like again, like there's no commas or pauses and it just seemed like a run-on sentence. So I like getting this rep in.
Well, like you said, it being only a month ago compared to maybe your last week's podcast with Jay Lou, how has your speech evolved since then?
From when we first started to J Lou's, at least like within this realm, I feel I've been able to like low key come a little more prepared for them
Mm.
because I like kind of scheduled it out with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to like think of what I wanted to say and certain questions and topics, you know. Um, I always had like a guideline of questions that I was going to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just let the conversation flow and kind of picked and chose the questions that I thought were relevant to the topic we were addressing or talking about at the time. So I feel like one, being more prepared, um, more being in tune with like my mind, the words, and my body, so it's all like moving as one in a sense, you know. I feel like I really do good with that in the weight room, but sometimes when I'm trying to again articulate my words, I'll rush through it. So, but then compared to J-Lu through now, you
Mm-hmm.
know, then a little like watching and trying to apply what I've learned, you know. So talking a little slower, taking more pauses, um, making sure to like enunciate my words and stuff as best as I can. So small little things, I feel, but it's still part of the journey. It's still at the beginning, so trying to get comfortable with it.
So you mentioned that you've been listening to Ask Vin
Yeah.
and how he's a good public speaker who is now teaching and helping others refine their speech. What is a strategy that you're currently working on? Like you mentioned the pause. In your journey to improve and use the pause, has there been opportunities where you've maybe overused it, it felt awkward, and then were there situations where the pause worked better for you?
Uh, I think it's been a little bit of both. I uh, I think the other day when my mentor was here, uh, talking to him, there were moments where my pauses were hella long,
Mm-hmm.
and I just lost my train of thought. You know, so those are one of those times that is like bitten me in the ass. You
Mm-hmm.
know, a lot of other times it's been like pretty successful. You
Mm-hmm.
know, to where it's like I'm not getting tangled up or tripping up over my words. So just being able to one pause in between.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when I talk, I produce a lot of saliva as
Mm-hmm.
well. As well,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds pretty bad, so pause. But being able to like swallow the saliva, you know, so my lisp where it doesn't sound so slippery.
Yo, wow, the fact that uh,
Made
was
sense.
organically produced and funny at the same time is actually, yeah, pretty profound. Well, with that being said, like I think when you imagine that you're pausing, or at least as I've noticed, the strategy at first seems like it would be awkward and that it wouldn't flow well. But at the same time, it does give you time to think. And as somebody whose brain probably works a little faster than my rate of speech, I find the pause to be very useful. And then, of course, creating that pause allows for the audience to really keep up and then also have anticipation for what you're saying next. and it's never as awkward as it feels. And I found that the more I've used it, the better pacing that I have in my speech, and then it just makes words more concise, and I'm able to remove filler words when I realize I'm using words like I like or or yeah. Those things get consciously removed, and then if you think less and less about it, and you think about what you want to say in the most concise manner, it flows a lot better anyways, and those words come up a lot less. And so, yeah, tripping over your words, like that's something I struggled with a lot when I was younger. Didn't realize that there's strategies. So when you find these gurus who are masters of little niche areas of self improvement, like it's pretty cool to see how there are techniques to essentially fix and alleviate any ailments or symptoms that you have, and then now you can be more smooth and flow better at the end of the day. So yeah. Uh, Besides the pause, then, are there other strategies that you've learned that you feel like you want to implement as well too when it comes to speech?
Uh, just improving, the vocabulary I use too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel something that I was taught when I was at like the Y or when I first started training was to always like dumb the conversation down, you know. And so I feel like when I am in conversation, sometimes I'm just making sure that like whoever I'm talking to understands what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
When in actuality, it's like I can't just practice my verbiage because it's just really me getting my reps in,
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that like I still find that middle ground of communicating with the uh, kids in a sense, like I've been really wanting to practice using like the anatomy terms, so making sure like if I'm talking to a younger kid, I'll still introduce it, but I'll always explain it.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the older kids, like it's cool now that they all know what a dorsiflexion is in their ankle,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like me being able to teach them these terms, so like when they do get to these classes or maybe get into this field, it's not like the first time they've heard it,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like making sure I'm doing it within my realm,
Mm-hmm.
and just practicing like again like improving my terminology in there and
Mm-hmm.
how I use it.
Yeah, I definitely see how when you're younger and maybe a little less experienced, because like you learn as a trainer early on that using bigger words and using maybe the correct anatomically correct the correct anatomical uh, vocabulary can be intimidating to clients, and so at times you'll have to find a better way to build rapport by, instead of saying glutes, you're saying like your butt or your hip or uh, more commonly used phrases to help the client understand better, and then your clients are always going to appreciate you more because you don't sound like you're trying to outsmart them.
Yeah.
uh, and so I can see that at a early stage it's beneficial, but I think as your clients progress, like for Jaden, uh, I've always tried to mix in formal basketball vocabulary when I'm talking to him so that he can then upgrade his level of speech and his basketball dialogue, so that now when he's talking to a coach, right, those little conversations that you have with the coach, like yes, you can understand them, but if you can also talk in their language and use terms that they're using on a daily basis, it gives them a little more trust that you know what you're talking about. And so I'm not, I don't always like being the person that has to correct somebody about their use of basketball terminology, but I see that if you let that continue to slide, then now you're allowing them to not be precise in their language, and then that is something that could bite them in the butt later on when they're trying to get recruited, when they're trying to appeal to a coach. And so, yeah, definitely when you're upgrading your vocabulary and you're setting a standard for how you should be talking in a professional setting, it allows your client to upgrade and level up from just these interactions. So,
Yeah. Um, I know you asked me about what I've been trying to
mhm.
practice. Is there anything that you've learned in the last like month or so since our first podcast that you've been trying to apply it to your day to day?
Yeah, I would say filler words, and definitely getting a lot more comfortable with the pause. I just think that I have to be okay with utilizing it and utilize it as often as possible. So even in regular dialogue with like Jelu or Lum or Ron, still trying to implement pauses, still trying to implement pace, and so it allows me time to articulate my thoughts better. But the number one thing right now that I'm focusing on is being more precise and being more concise with my language, because in the English language you have the flexibility to, like the word happy, right? There's so many different ways that you can be quote unquote happy. Like you can be delighted, you can be enlightened, you can be ecstatic, you can be happy, you can be joyful. Like there's just so many different states of happy, for example, that the English language allows you to really define how you feel or how you want to state your emotional state. So I think that that in itself, being more concise, helps you get the message across in a manner that seems more well thought out. And so that's been my biggest thing, is the vocabulary, syntax, the diction, and it then goes into text as well too. Trying to text a little more formal, trying to text a little more straightforward. Like when I text with Lee Hang, it's always a "Hey Derek," comma, and then she'll go into it like letter form, and so I'm sure that she's not consciously choosing to do that, but rather it's just how she speaks, especially during her work hours. That's how she's probably texting everybody else.
Yeah.
I see there is value in that, because then it shows, like we talked about yesterday, right? Punctuality versus appearance. Like it shows the person on the receiving end that you're taking the time to, for one, use their name, use punctuation, put breaks, so that it's able to be perceived in a certain manner. I think that's really good. So, yeah, definitely a word choice
Yeah.
and vocabulary.
That's what's up, bro. Actually, yesterday in the meeting, during that question, I had Kenny and Jorge in the group,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to let them know. I was like, you don't have to worry about either of those
Mm-hmm.
if you're good with your time management. You ain't got to worry about appearance because you're already taking care of it before you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna get to your spot early.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so make um, just telling him and Jorge like, yeah, like if you're able to stay on top of your stuff and make sure that you're planning things ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
neither of those you have to choose between because you're handling both of them. You know, so but it obviously if you had to choose between the two, it'd
Mm-hmm.
be punctuality.
Right.
You know, so um, I thought that was a whole like funny bit in the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was happy that as we got to that third point, Ant picked up on it,
yeah,
because to be honest, when I wrote it, it was on the homies like edit of that portion of the meeting,
yeah,
and it put, punctuality or appearance, and when I typed it up, I was like, I think I think it's punctuality, but I don't really know where and why. And so, thankfully he was able to bridge it and allow us to know that, well, punctuality, you're giving honor to the person on the receiving end, whereas appearance is a more selfish desire. I was like, okay, yeah, that helped, because
yeah,
it
yeah.
helped me gain some understanding before I had to speak, and so it was a little more fluid. But that was just a funny thing
No,
that
it was smooth.
happened.
The meeting went really, yeah, it was fluid, bro. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like there was any hiccups or even when you were taking your pauses
Mm-hmm.
as you were communicating with the team, it was like organic in a sense, you know, to where it's like you're not just pausing for a dramatic effect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, hey, I'm really trying to get this message to you guys and obviously applying what you learned, you know, in your speech and making sure the message you needed to get across came across,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially for Don. And it was his first meeting to be a part of. So I thought it was smooth, you know, and it
Yeah.
went good and it was cool. We were all there, you know. And again, like having Ant talk about the book and then bridging it to your key points and your presentation was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've definitely come a long way in our meetings from how they first started initially. I think the message, concepts, and ideas will have always been pretty elite. And I
Yeah.
think over time, just our ability to conduct the meeting, organize in a succinct manner, and present it to the group has definitely grown. And
Yeah.
I think, with time, like, those things are bound to happen. I'm happy that it went the way it did, and I was able to prep for that one, but also prep for the next couple.
Yeah.
So I'm able to kind of look ahead and make sure that everything is in succession. Uh, so I would say, yeah, it was good, and hopefully everybody got something out of that, or at least just a reminder of what we need to do and how we need to be. Listening to Ant talk, I think this would be the biggest thing in terms of public speaking and delivery right now. I know I mentioned that vocabulary is like the biggest skill I'm working on, but I think this one's an overarching one, right? Because this one that I'm going to like talk about is not just the speech itself and the skill of speech, but also just who you are as a person. And I think one thing that Ant does really well is there's a lot of passion.
Yeah.
It's a lot of passion, and there's a lot of conviction in the things that he is saying. Where, as I'm improving my speech, I think it still sounds a little robotic at times, and it sounds like I'm just trying to deliver like a pre-boxed message. Where for him, it's more flow, it's more passion, and at the end of the day, it's more powerful.
Yeah.
So I've recognized that, and I've recognized my deficiency in that, and so I guess that's the biggest thing I'm trying to work on. But then that goes to number one, knowing who you are, what you're about, and what you're trying to get across, and then number two, like actually delivering it. And so I'm starting to figure out that first part, like who I am, what I stand for, what kind of things are important to me. And then now it's okay, well then how do I bring that message and tie it in a way that is going to strike on their heartstrings and make them feel a certain type of way so that they're able to receive maybe the more bland and more technical information. Like I'm pretty good with the technical, but when it comes to the purpose and passion part, it's not that I don't know it, it's just I haven't had to deliver it in that way. I think anytime that I've gotten emotional in the past in a conversation, um, it's made me maybe tear up or become a little overwhelmed by the emotion, just because growing up, that's not something that you're constantly tapping into. So when you tap into it now, it's like, how do you control it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever feel that way in terms of the message you're trying to deliver?
Definitely. You had mentioned the whole feeling robotic, you know, and that's a term I used talking to Jaden yesterday because one of the kids used it on me, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
I really talk about like the consistency and trying to improve and time management, and I'm super monotone.
Mm.
So the reply was, "Are you a robot?" You know, because it's like that's how I move throughout my day.
Sure.
And so it made me think like even when I talk, like since I am monotone or when I do take my pauses, it does sound like a little like robotic,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so some at times if I'm talking to somebody, like this is me just reflecting on it,
Mm-hmm.
like I could sound like a Siri or like a, you know, just a robot like giving you information, you know? So
Right.
maybe the passion or the fire doesn't feel the same,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
as what I'm trying to portray, you know. But again, like you're saying, it's something from when we were kids that we're working on to try to break that barrier,
Right.
you know, and improve on, you know. So I don't know what I have to do to fix my voice being monotone, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but it's like, you know, just practicing different things or different flows, or I guess not the flow, but the cadence,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And so making sure that I'm able to catch myself at times when the thought or the words could be drifting away and
Mm-hmm.
getting away, you know. So
I think it's a embodiment of your character as well because you're very chill and nothing is like too serious or nothing that is overwhelming that can be overcame with time. So for you, when you're talking, you're not making a big deal out of it because maybe in your mind, like it's not necessarily a big deal. Perhaps I'm just
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
aloud. Whereas for Ant, he also mentioned to me when we were outside, and he said that's his character, but that's been his character since he was a kid. Like whether it's team sports that he was involved in, like he was always the captain figure, and he was always the person who was bridging the gap between teammates and coaches. He was always the on-court coach. He was somebody who was holding guys accountable and firing people up. And so he has had practice in those skill sets for so long. Where for us, we're really diving into it now, or diving into the last couple years. So inherently, there's going to be skills that are built over time and through his consistency that we just haven't developed yet. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it's good that we notice that, and now it's going to allow us and our rate of growth to be that much quicker because we know where we're lacking and what we need, and we can actually find ways to target, the precise uh, lessons that we need to learn. So, yeah, he's just somebody who's done that for so long. He's been passionate and emotional for so long that it just comes natural to him to sway emotion and get more out of people through speech. I think for me, I've noticed that there is that character, but that character usually comes in more playful settings or like at parties, when I used to be drinking and I'm getting on people and I'm usually pretty animated when I'm antagonizing people.
Okay, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
where now that I'm trying not to antagonize people, I sound robotic too because it's just not something that maybe a skin that I'm not super comfortable in yet, to where I can let loose and let my voice be heard in the way that it should be. Uh, I mean, we are constructing our identity and constructing the best version of us, and I think the more we live in that skin, the better we get at it. So yeah, just kind of adding on to what you were saying. And so for you, what settings do you recall, like in the past, do you feel the most comfortable to, like, have your voice be really high or have your voice be really excited, and what kind of emotions are usually tied to that in those settings?
I guess if I'm like on the field or on the court, I
Okay.
feel like those are moments that I'm pretty loud or pretty fiery,
Okay.
So I think like in competitive situations,
Mm-hmm.
I am typically like having those moments where I'm not so calm with the voice. I'm trying
Mm.
to be a little loud, at times, and it's not like I'm actually trying to do it. It's just something that naturally happens,
Mm-hmm.
whether I'm like yelling at a ref or talking to some of the kids, like
Yeah.
if they're on the bench, yeah, but if they're like on the field or the court, it's like
Mm-hmm.
being able to project my voice then compared to like a situation like now where it's like I feel myself sometimes talking and then drifting back from the microphone,
Sure.
you know, instead of projecting my voice to you, I feel it pulling away,
Mm-hmm.
So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like on the floor or in the weight room or on a field or somewhere outside, I'm a little more comfortable with
Mm.
projecting my voice or
Mm-hmm.
having that energy.
Like
Yeah.
more as a necessity, kind of like, well, you have to, because if
Yeah.
not, you're not going to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same because I think people who know me naturally uh, would say that I'm maybe shy, timid, or introverted a lot of the times, especially in social settings. And I for one feel that way myself. But the funny thing is, when I'm coaching, like I also don't sound like me. Like I've discovered that voice through coaching, and my ability to enunciate, uh, to project my voice and to be heard in that manner. Like that's something that I've definitely learned through the course of coaching, just because you have to.
Yeah.
And sometimes in that realm, it's a battle of controlling your emotions, and your emotions come out a lot. And so when I was known as a coach who cussed too much and was always getting on my guys. I'm pretty sure I developed some of it during that time too, for better or for worse. But yeah, definitely. I think in a coach setting, I sound different than I do on a day to day too, and
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
can definitely see where that applies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you definitely have a great coaching voice, bro.
it's pretty different. It's pretty crazy. But to this day, I don't get it because like I'll still have it's like a sore throat. Like even after one day, I remember there was a tournament in LA, went to OGP. Perhaps I think I had another tournament prior to that week, and so my voice was already pretty hoarse. Like before we got down there, after the first game, like midway through the first game, I just lost my voice, and for the rest of the weekend, I was talking like this, and I just couldn't like talk louder. And so on Saturday, the next day, Austin had to coach the game basically because I just couldn't. And I don't know, like, I think my voice should be well trained at this point because I've done it for so long. But when I'm out of practice and I don't,
Yeah.
it tends to then leave very quickly. So I don't know how
One
to
of
fix
the
that.
one of the videos I Ask Vin had was talking about warming up your lips and your vocal cords
Mm.
before you talk.
Hmm.
You know, and so he's doing things like, you know, like squeezing his cheeks together and
Hmm.
like humming songs as he's doing it, you know.
Mm.
And so I feel like as you were talking, it just made me like piece things together where it's like, it's also like a workout,
Sure.
you know. You just gotta get your warm ups in, you know, your practice, your
Hmm.
or the conditioning side of it until that hopefully slowly goes away.
Hmm.
Maybe in your case it won't, you know.
Who knows?
But who knows? Yeah. So
Those Vin's not youngest brother Matt, but the middle brother Kevin. One time Vin was telling me a funny story about Kevin and how he brought Kevin out uh, to like a family party or something, and Kevin was like, it was like a morning family party, and so Kev was like really quiet, and so Ben was like what's going on? You know, Kev's like, I just I'm just not warmed up to talk yet. Like I'm just not ready to. Maybe it's a mental thing, or maybe it's a physical thing, right? But he just didn't feel like ready to socialize in that setting, and so it was funny in that time when we were talking about it, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how's that possible? But yeah, I can see that. I can see that it is a muscle. I mean, and you have to warm it up and you have to condition it to be ready for game time. And I think I just haven't done enough of that on a consistent basis. Because we do go long breaks like a season or even like this. Like we have 3 weeks in between before our next tournament. So I could assume the next tournament come out is going to be a little choppy too, as well. So yeah. Any other topics that you have on top of your mind? I had something, but I lost it to be honest. Okay, then I think I have one more. We can finish with this. But so for those of you who don't know, normally on Sundays we coach our ninja girls. They're now 10th grade girls, and we see them once a week. In the fall season and the spring season, we play 3 to 4 tournaments over the course of 2.5 to 3 months. And so sometimes we play more, sometimes we play usually 3 at the minimum. But we try to operate like a very high level team, even though we don't have high level contact time together. So a high school team, let's say they practice 2 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Now you're practicing 10 to 12 hours to then put a product on the court that it's supposed to look like they have the continuity of a team who practices 10 to 12 hours a week. For us, we practice 1.5 hours a week and then expect to show up for 3 games in a row with that high level continuity, even though we don't have that time. And so, being that we also preach our teams being player led, meaning that we want our teams to be able to, as players, hold one another accountable, as players, pick somebody up when they're down, as players eventually make the calls and make the reads and make the adjustments on their own. And so it's just like we want a player-led team, but we don't have the time And so last week, I was talking to Kimo and I decided we should let the girls coach themselves and see how it goes for a day.
Yeah.
And so we started by listing our non-negotiables on offense, our non-negotiables on defense. These 10 things collectively create the identity that we want to have as a team. And then from that collective identity, usually that's what you fall back on, or that's what you relate every drill to, right? They have to emphasize one, if not a couple, of these non-negotiables within each drill. And so after we talked about our non-negotiables, I then allowed them maybe like 15 minutes or so to write a practice plan up. And we proceeded to practice for an hour after that so they can understand, one, how coach feels when coach has to create a practice plan. Two, dividing time, dividing attention, making sure that you're covering everything in a succinct manner so that you're making the most of your time. Because obviously you practice once a week, you play 3 games, like you pretty much practice as many hours as you play. There's hard times to build continuity. And then lastly, what hopefully they felt why it is important as players to do their own work outside of practice so that we can make this hour and a half the most efficient hour and a half that we have possible. And so I bring that up to ask you, Kimo, that one, from the start to the end of them having a fully 100% player-led practice. Like, how did you feel about that? How did you feel that it went?
First answer, as a coach, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
Because typically we were very involved in practice. To have to like kind of sit back a little, it was like time seemed it was moving a little slower.
Mm-hmm.
But like being able to take the practice in, like I thought they led it really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like something they did a lot was they would make the correction right on the spot, and actually like talk it up.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling Jorge, like, they broke into groups, and one of the shout outs from one of the girls was like, hey, like, I appreciate you guys helping me because now I can finally understand play. I don't know if you remember that,
mm-hmm.
but just having moments like that to where it's like sometimes if a kid's not understanding, they don't ask the coaches,
mm-hmm.
and it's easier for them to ask their peers,
mm-hmm.
And they just haven't had enough time to be able to ask that because again they only see each other once a week for an hour and a half.
Right.
And so for them to lead the practice, kind of clean things up. Obviously it doesn't look perfect because it was still only an hour and a half, but I felt there was a lot of growth within the team. Them also being able to see what it does take to run a practice and have a practice schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I think even at the end of the 15 minutes, they asked for more time,
mm-hmm.
Because they're like, oh shit, like, how do I make sure I am filling all these cups within this short time? And I definitely felt at first the energy was a little low
mm-hmm.
and giggly,
mm-hmm.
the sense of humor, like everyone's sense of humor was showing. But as practice went on, they locked in a little more, especially when they started going live, between the breaks or between when we went 2-on-2. There was a lot more communication than there has been before,
mm-hmm.
And I think it gave them all like a sense of like a leadership role in a sense, especially breaking into the 2 groups. It's like, hey, like I don't have to talk over anyone. It's just you and I.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is what I see. What are you seeing?
Mm-hmm.
Then make the right adjustments, And then when we all got together at the end, I definitely felt the energy in the group was different at the end. Like,
sure,
girls who normally wouldn't talk at the end or give shout outs at the end,
mm-hmm.
gave shout outs and they spoke, So felt like one, again, as a coach, it was kind of boring at first, but then again, to be able to sit back and just see how mature the girls are and how they were able to conduct the practice was really great, So I know you said we'd do a few more of those, or at least give them a portion of it, and I feel like that's going to be really big for them in
mm-hmm.
their basketball journey too, and something they can all take back to their teams. Not necessarily running a team practice, but like being able to see the game in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I think
How about-
definitely. Sorry,
I was gonna say, how did you feel? Yeah.
I think they handled it really well. Like when I first handed the board over to them, I thought it was too much. But a part of me also knows the benefit of throwing somebody into the fire, and you can see them start to try and recall. Right, the first thing they put out was war, and we always start with the war, and we haven't done it in a while. But still, that's like the first thing that comes to mind for them. So in my head, I'm wondering like, is that something they want to do, or is that what they're recalling that we normally do during practice, and so they're just trying to fill the gaps with what they remember. And I think over time, us prompting them with like, well, what about press break? What about out of bounds? What about this? What about that? Then they kind of understood they saw the pieces of the puzzle, and then they started jigsawing it to how they felt was appropriate. I thought that was a much better way to do it. I think moving forward, giving them a little structure is going to help them innovate better. Because sometimes when it's too free and too open, they you can't expect them to know because they've never done it, but they don't really know where things should go and how to make things flow smoothly. So I think we give them little pieces to deal with, like, hey, you guys are gonna work on transition defense, and that's your team focus. Like, figure it out. Then they'll have a little bit more of an idea of how they want to organize it. And so I think moving forward, we're gonna give them at least like a third of practice to run in their own. Right now, as we're speaking, I don't know if it's gonna be us coaching first and them coaching last, or them coaching first and then us taking over towards the end. So I'm not sure yet. We'll figure that out as we go. But you've said pretty much all of it, and so I don't really have anything to add to the way I felt it went. Uh, I just want to say that yes, I agree. It did feel very boring at first, but we always preach, and I always believe that a player-led team goes farther than a coach-led team does. And when you have 10 to 12 hours a week, you can't afford to give them 30 minutes to an hour to 2 hours, right? Because you can make up for it. Whereas for us, like us doing this really it is showing our ability to make a decision that benefits them. Because a lot of these girls, like they'll come to practice, they'll expect to be led, and they'll just do as they're asked, and then they'll go home.
Yeah.
And so now that you're physically there, and your brain might have to think a little bit, or you might just have to really focus on what you have to do to not be punished, as opposed to like, oh shoot, what do we have to do to get better? Like that's a different mindset.
Yeah.
And so now they'll come in, hopefully with a better gauge of what is right, what is wrong, and how to hold one another accountable. Because that's my biggest thing. That's like, we do a great job of lifting each other up when we're down. We do a great job of bonding and being together, but we don't do a great job of holding one another accountable. And so we talk about family. And family means that you're there for them through thick and thin, right? And so when things are not going the way they're supposed to go, somebody needs to have the hard conversations. Somebody needs to be calling somebody else out. And you don't have to do it in a negative, antagonistic way, but you have to do it. And it might not always sound pretty and it might hurt somebody's feelings, but at the end of the day, we understand that the main goal is to come together collectively to get better and to ultimately win. Then that's just what has to be done. And then we understand for one another more. So definitely would like to see more of that. Definitely just like to see them have more prep time, because I think they do well with prep time.
Yeah.
And they do well with coordinating with one another. And then it forces them to be like, instead of me telling them we have a Zoom for an hour, we're forcing upon them another hour together. If we put out a challenge, we might get them 2 more hours together, because they feel like that's the necessary time frame they need to be successful. And then, because they have to organize, then they have to deal with everybody's shifting schedule, as opposed to us doing it. And so we can't really teach them to be leaders unless we let them lead. And we can't have them feel a sense of ownership if they don't own anything. So if you do own a portion of our practice, you own a third of the time that we take each week to prepare. Like, you're owning a third of the program essentially, which they are, right? They're the third. They're one of the 3 parties within the program: the parents, the players, and us as the coaches. So giving them that third now allows them that third. So that was big, and I really enjoyed the way it went. And I feel like Yeah, the 2-on-2 portion was good. Putting them back together in the same teams was good.
Yeah.
I need to keep a little more consistency in the things that we do if we want to see those things improve. So, yeah, that was good.
No, that was good, bro. It was a good practice. So, let's see how the Reno tournament goes. That's next week.
Yeah, I would like. I told them I would eventually do this, but I guess what I'm saying is I would like for them to coach themselves.
Yeah.
At least for a quarter, at least for a half, at least for a game, right? Like somebody step in, somebody coach, and we're there to assist.
Yeah.
Because like when are you gonna get that opportunity? You know, some people play all their life and never get to run a practice, or never get to coach.
Yeah.
When we expect them to coach on the court or run the practices as us, you know, but we don't allow that opportunity, and so those things, win or lose, is going to
help with their development in the long run.
Way farther down the line. Like the black shirts are great, but well, yeah, it's black shirts doesn't matter if they can make us 100 black shirts later on in life because they have the luxury to do so. So
yeah, facts. Yeah, I think it would be amazing and a great goal if like all of our girls were able to have that leadership, and then like I mentioned earlier, them learning things and going to their own high schools. Now imagine they are those players that are able to recognize what defense the other team's running or their offense, and then make the proper adjustments and go out there and lead their team, the right way. Obviously it's wishful thinking, but it's like, yeah, we do. If they don't get those opportunities or moments at practice, then when will they? And I never really thought about it until I think you said that the other day. Like, there's some players who went through their whole career and never felt what it was like to do that, So I think that's big for the girls too, gives them that confidence and again that ownership. So
yeah, something they might enjoy, right? For us, like again, to close it, we have a good conversation so far. Like to close it, we are coaches, and at what point in a player's career does it ever cross their mind that they might enjoy coaching? And so you might give them this experience now, and they're like, "Oh well, that felt kind of good."
Yeah,
like, I like to be able to lead and help influence a group's decision, and I didn't ever felt like I could as a player, but in this like temporary coaching position, I feel like I had more influence and I had more of a voice. And then A, that could help them on the court in the next, stage of their career. Or B, like they realize a way that they can stay in basketball, even when basketball's done. And so, yeah, I think overall it's a step in the right direction. I think more coaches should be open to allowing players to grow. I think all coaches know and say the right things, but when it comes time to put into action, we're a little bit fearful to let go of the reins and let go of control, because coaches at the end of the day are like control freaks. But like as a parent, right, you know your kids are gonna fly the coop one day, and they're gonna go to college, or they're gonna move out, or they have their own job, and if all you have done your whole life is control, then you have no idea what they're gonna look like when you're not around. So you rather have an impression and an ability to influence who that person looks like and who that person views themselves as, and then now you can be a lot more sure when that time comes, and you can be have a lot more trust for them, and then that trust allows them freedom, allows them to be independent. Now you're raising the next generation in the right way to carry on the legacy, as opposed to follow in your footsteps. So, yeah. And then add to that close.
Oh, bro. It's well said.
Yes, sir. Good work today.
Yes, sir.
Another one of the books.